So let's go ahead and get this started. I want to thank you all for logging in and joining us on our second in a series of webinars. My name is Eric Peterson. I'm the president for the Aero Club of Northern California. And the Aero Club came up with this idea at a fairly recent board meeting as a way to engage with our members, given that we can't do our annual Crystal Eagle dinner this year. We did go ahead and cancel that if you haven't heard the word. So we came up with this idea. It was, our first one was a couple weeks ago. It was well received. Our second session is today. These we are providing free of charge to anybody who wants to participate. We do ask that if you feel the urge that you can log into our GoFundMe page and make a small donation. We're using those to fund our scholarship program, which historically we have given away $6,000 a year in scholarships at our Crystal Eagle dinner. And we intend to do that again this year. The funding for that has historically come from our silent auction table, which obviously we won't have this year. So if you're interested, please do that. I will put the link in the chat window here shortly. And with that, I want to introduce you to Richard Bandy, who is one of our board members. He's actually the secretary, the one responsible for taking notes and keeping everybody centered and moving in the right direction. And Richard is going to introduce our guest speaker this night. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, Richard.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Richard Bandy, and just for you, so you know, Eric, I did post the GoFundMe link into the group chat, so you don't have to worry about that. I'm currently an airport operations specialist at San Jose, where John Aitken, our director, has so graciously decided to donate some of his time to us tonight and tell us all about how COVID has just turned things upside down at the airport. So John has been at San Jose for about 10 times longer than I have. I've been there 2 years and he's been there over 20. Currently at the top as the director of aviation. And he recently, last year, oversaw the extension of our interim facility. If you haven't been there yet, we just added 6 new gates. So we currently have 30 gates, and it's the fastest I've ever seen gates be added to an airport. There was 30 when I started. A year later, there was 36. It was like magic how fast they got that up there. So without further ado, I'll go ahead and turn it over to John Aitken.
Thanks, Richard. I've got a presentation to share, so let me try and do that. Okay, you can all see the presentation now? All right, so we'll start with a little bit about me that Richard didn't hit. I have been there actually 27 years, so creeping up towards 30, which hopefully will be my max. But seen the airport go through a tremendous amount of change over those 27 years, and a lot of it tends to repeat. And I wanted to start with kind of our passenger growth to share with everybody the size of challenge we're hitting this time versus 9/11 and versus the Great Recession. So you can see when 9/11 happened, we dropped about 3 million passengers from about 13 and change to about 10.7. A significant change to our passenger trend, and it's something that we didn't come out of for quite a while. Strangely enough, in 2006 here, things were flat and we thought it wasn't going to get any worse and we were going to grow at 4% a year for the rest of our life. Signed a new airline lease agreement and started building Terminal B in the TAIP, the Terminal Area Improvement Program. But then, of course, the Great Recession, the oil prices, all of that hit. we opened Terminal B in 2010 here at the bottom of our trough. So we had increased our mortgage to $1.2 billion and had cut another 2 million passengers out of our throughput. So a tough couple years. We went through some layoffs, some tough times. As you can see, it kind of just wallowed around the low 8s for a couple years. We really struggled to get out of that. As a medium hub during that Great Recession, the airlines were really focused on their bigger hubs so that they could continue to dominate in those locations. And medium hubs really took the brunt of the hit. We started growing in 2013 a little bit at a time. It was still a conservative growth, and it was still well below, what we had done before 9/11. Around 2018, here when we were reaching 14.3, we had grown for 3 years at 1 million passengers a year we'd added. So we quickly added 2 gates, gate 29 and 30. And if you've been out there, we added those gates. Well, there's the TAIP. There's what we built in 2010. And so we added the 2 gates in December of 2018. We added them for about $9.2 million. And basically what they are 2 super long fixed bridges and then 2 jet bridges with a small hold room back up in the main terminal. It was a quick way and a cheap way for us to get 2 more gates because Southwest was growing and Alaska was growing, and they were both in Terminal B, and so they were pushing on each other, and this gave us a relief valve back when we were at this point. Shortly after those gates came into service, December of 2018. Shortly after those came into service, we realized it wasn't enough. Southwest wanted 7 more gates, and so we built the interim facility, which took about 11 months to build. It's I have the statistics back here. Took about 11 months to build. It's 15,000 square feet. Cost us $58 million for 6 gates with jetways. Now, this terminal building is about 3 feet off the ground to save money. And so the jet bridges actually go up to the plane. But it was a cheap, disposable way for us to build 6 gates. Now, most of you know there's another phase to the terminal program that builds a Terminal C and another 16 gates. So we squeezed this building in such a way that it's not in the way of the permanent structure. So at San Jose, we have a nose road between the airplane and the terminal building. It's a 2-lane nose road. That's how wide this building is 2 lanes of traffic on the ramp. So we've squeezed it where we used to drive so that I can build the building behind it while this is still operating with passengers in it. So it is super long and about 28 feet wide. So it's tight, but it's functional. The airlines liked it because they'd never before been able to get 6 gates for $58 million in 11 months. So they were pretty impressed with the process on that. So that opened June of 2019. We opened the first 4 gates, and then November we opened the last 2 gates. So back to the chart. For 2019, we made it to 15.7 million passengers for the calendar year. The estimate right now for calendar year 2020 is about 5.1 million. So I wanted to do this slide mostly to show you the drop that we had at 9/11 seemed astronomical and potentially hard to come back from. Then we had the Great Depression where we lost about 2.5 million passengers, and it seemed like nothing could ever get worse than that, and we'd survived, and so we never have to think about that again. And then we come here and we dropped just over 10 million passengers a year, to a level that, I don't know, San Jose probably hasn't had since long before I was working there. But a dramatic change in our thing. And that's just an estimate. I mean, we're trying to estimate our growth pattern out of this. Currently, just for statistical data, we used to put about 25,000 passengers a day through the checkpoint. In April, our low point was 464. So a dramatic drop. We're already in June, we're already getting close to 3,000, but still nowhere close to 25,000. So tough time. This kind of shows you the passenger traffic month by month. And so you see January was another record month. February, you can see, was above the other February. So kind of the same trend. It would have come up and kept going like this and just followed slightly above the gold. Well, March happened, and in the first part of March, we did the shelter in place. Things started just stopping slowly over time. It took most of the month of March to get from high growth rate to disastrous. So March came in right here around little over 550,000 passengers. April dropped all the way down to about 60 to 70,000. And then May has come up, and June is coming up again. May's actually double of April, and right now June looks like it's going to be double of May, but doubling a small number is still a small number. So it's a long ways to go to get back to where we were. The things that we've realized since we started this process in March and mostly April was that we had to start building confidence for our passengers. And so we went ahead and required face coverings before it was required in Santa Clara County because our two neighboring airports were doing it. And we felt that, you know, the Bay Area should stay together in this. And so we required face masks about a week before Santa Clara asked us to, the county. We could not find hand sanitizers or sanitized wipes, you know, the Clorox wipes at any place. You know, obviously you couldn't even find them for your house. So we had to hand make sanitizing stations that would dispense the liquid into your hand. We had to make buckets that would hold the towels. We've gone to wiping down all the surfaces. We have electrostatic fogging machines that we use every day in the terminal. The plexiglass is going up. You can see in this lower left, the plexiglass around the counter here. It's at all the ticket counters, all the gate counters, all the ticket lift podiums. The concessionaires have it at their point of sale devices. And then we have to do this, and we've tried to advertise it, put it on social media, trying to build confidence in the system to make the passengers feel like they're safe during this transition from their personal vehicle to the airplane. We want them to feel safe. So a couple of the financial things, I've got a few slides that go into future development, which I'll wait on because I know most of you wanted to know about COVID. Financially, the airport was hit pretty hard. We have closed, with our concessions, we've closed most of the restaurants and retail stores in the airport. Currently at Terminal A, we have a Starbucks open, and in Terminal B, we have Chick-fil-A and a Starbucks open. But the rest of them are closed because there's just not enough passengers to do that. Terminal B is getting to the point where we're going to open a couple more restaurants because it's actually getting a little busier than it was. But with that, those food and beverage and retail concessions have bid minimum annual guarantees to us, millions of dollars that they guarantee they'll pay us, even though currently they're only selling a couple Chick-fil-A sandwiches, you know, an hour. So the concessions, the rental cars, all of them are asking for MAG relief from the airport. we currently budget about $19 million a year in MAGs, in minimum annual guarantees from these concessionaires. And they want us just to forgive all that, which obviously is going to hit our bottom line and, affect how we can pay our bills and do stuff. So being a landlord's not always the most gracious thing during a time like this. In part of the relief, the airport was awarded almost $66 million from the first CARES Act that we're able to use to offset anything that we need. It's fairly broadly written that we can use it for any legal purpose on the airport. Our plan right now is to use 2/3 of the money in fiscal year 21 that starts in July, and then hold 1/3 of it for fiscal year 22, because we're not sure this is going to be over in a year. So we're going to save some of it for the future. We were able to get through fiscal year 20, which ends here in a few days, because the first 9 months of the year were really, really good. And so all of that high performance is now being shot balancing the books for the last 3 months, where we were in negative territory for revenue. Let's see. That's about it for that. So some things that are coming up. I don't know how many San Jose State graduates are on board. I saw Scott was on board too, but in the old San Jose State site, in the southwest corner of the airport, it's currently a nice grassy meadow. Fire Station 20, our ARF station, is going to be built there. Should be starting construction in the next couple months. You see at the bottom is the airside view of it. So it's got 5 bays. We have 3 trucks, a rescue truck, and then a spare. So that's our 5 bays. On the land side, uniquely, the top picture, this is that red fire truck you see there is basically parallel to Coleman Avenue on the land side of the facility. The San Jose City Fire Department had asked to put a small fire station at the airport to respond to landside issues, because you've got Avaya Stadium there, the development across the street. There's a lot of stuff that there wasn't a fire station in the area. So they've added a landside bay and a landside team and truck to the station to handle those off-site jobs in the area. Kind of a unique thing. The FAA will obviously only pay for the airside part of the building. So the dormitory rooms for the landside bay itself, half the kitchen, all of that stuff, the FAA won't pay for. The city is paying for. And then we're doing the 80-20 grant with the FAA for the balance of the building. It's about 18,000 square feet. Our share for the airside part is about $10 million. And it will hopefully be LEED silver when it's complete. So you should see that going up shortly. In April, we went to City Council, and for the first time since 1997, we put forward a new EIR for our CEQA certification for our master plan, which also went in for a major amendment. The environmental went through. It took us 2 years to work through the environmental process, but that has all passed the council. We're working on the NEPA certification right now, the federal environmental stuff. But this gives us the green light to work on some new projects. For those of you that don't know where it is when I say the San Jose State property, it's over here. This is Coleman Avenue and 880. And this is the San Jose State location that's been gone now for 5, 6, 7 years. The ARF building's in the middle. We're going to replace the PD hangar for their helicopters and fixed wing here just to the south of it. And then just to the north of it will be 2 new buildings for our facilities and engineering staff. They're currently down here in the way of the master plan terminal development. So facilities is going to move over here. This is Atlantic and Signature. There's about 15 acres here, still open land that was used for parking. We'll probably put an RFP out for that in the not too distant future, trying to see if there's additional potential uses over there. As far as in the terminal zone, we're going to make a Terminal C just south of Terminal B, and then a long south concourse that adds basically 16 gates to the structure. We'll add a new parking structure, which is just south of the rental car facility. And then at the bottom of the U-turn, where you make the turn to go around, the bottom of the circle, parking lot 4, if you're familiar with the airport, we're going to put in a 350-room hotel through a developer program where we don't actually invest the money. We do a land lease, and the developer will come in, build the hotel, run it, and share the profits with us. To the south of the terminal, we have a very small belly freight facility that was built in the late 60s, early 70s, and it's outsized and doesn't work well for the airlines. We're going to put in a new belly freight facility just south of where the terminal stops, which would allow for semi-trucks to deliver in belly freight, get sorted, screened. It will also be where we screen all the products going into the terminal building. Currently, we screen them in front of the terminal, which is basically ugly. And so we're going to move it down here so it all gets screened here and then brought up to the concessions for their products. There's a few other small projects, but that's kind of what we're looking for in the master plan. Again, this is something that doesn't have a due date. The ARF is under construction. I hope to start the facilities and the hangar this fall if we continue to grow and I can continue to see a way to pay for the facilities. And then the Terminal C is really going to depend on our airlines, the passenger count, the relationship we maintain with the airlines about faith and ability to do it, because this is going to be another $1 billion with a B. So that would take our debt up to $2.2 billion. So I need to be fairly assured that I'm going to have the passengers to pay for that before I have the city sign on the bottom line. Our annual mortgage payment for the first $1.2 billion that we already did for Terminal B is just about $90 million a year. So it's a pretty good sized mortgage payment. So this is a blow up of that area, in case you're not totally familiar with the area that I was talking about, but this Conrack is where the rental cars are. This is the end of Terminal B. And again, the concourse will connect, so you can walk all the way from gate 42 all the way to gate 1 up in Terminal A. When you're on the air side, you can walk that whole concourse back and forth. You just have 3 ways to get in: the Terminal A lobby, the Terminal B lobby, and then the Terminal C lobby. And then the belly freight, the hotel, and the parking structure there. And that's it. That was just a little under 30 minutes. Not bad, Eric, huh?
No, very, very nicely done, John.
So I'd be happy to answer questions or just go from there, talk about whatever.
So there are a few questions
Okay.
that have been posted while you were talking. One of them was, what can you tell us about what has happened on the corporate aviation side of the field?
Corporate aviation is hurting as well. You know, both in conversations with Atlantic and Signature, fuel sales are down tremendously. Their ramps are mostly empty. Their hangars are still full because the base tenants, obviously their planes are still here. Mm-hmm. but the movement and activity is where they make more of their money, right? They make their money on the fuel, not so much the renting the hangar space. And that has fallen off dramatically. And so they're hurting right now. They're hoping for a small recovery. And I think as Silicon Valley corporations start to reactivate and start to get back into business, as much as we all love Zoom, I think the corporate CEOs are going to be traveling and those planes are going to start flying, but they're in a severe trough, probably as bad as we are.
Yeah, that's similar to what we've seen at the GA airport. Very dramatic change in operations. Another question I have here is, has San Jose seen a significant increase in activity for commercial cargo over the past 3 months?
The cargo is mostly restricted by our curfew. So UPS and FedEx, the change hasn't been very dramatic because their flying is restricted because they can't land at San Jose until after 6:30. They like to get here early and sort things and get them in a truck before 6:30. So I know Oakland has seen a big uptick in that kind of stuff. We do have the Hainan flight to Beijing has been repurposed, and it's no longer flying passengers because of the China-U.S. relationship and the fact that you can only land at the 13 airports that have CDC at them. So they've repurposed that airplane, and they're flying cargo in 2 to 3 days a week from Shenzhen and Shanghai and a couple other cities in China. So we have seen a little bit of that. In fact, the operations group told me this morning that the flight yesterday was entirely full, bottom and top, with N95 masks. So an entire 787-900 shoved full of N95 masks coming to Silicon Valley so we can all wear them while we're walking around town. So a small change, but not as much as what Oakland will see because of our curfew.
So in that flight, are they using the passenger plane? They just pull the seats out of it?
It's funny because the ops team was telling me there was still a crew of 12 on the airplane. I'm like, 12? You need 2 pilots for each way, so you need 4 pilots. Why do you have 12? He said, they have a full crew of flight attendants. And I said, you know what? That's right. The flight attendants aren't measured by the number of passengers. They're measured by the number of seats. And Hainan didn't take the seats out. So they still have 8 flight attendants sitting in the first 2 rows of first class, while the rest of the seats have boxes strapped in them. But according to, the aviation law, you have to have 1 flight attendant for every 50 seats, whether there's a passenger or not. So strange little thing. So
that's crazy.
Yeah, so that all that becomes overhead, right? For those packages, they all have to pay that extra for flight attendants.
So I had another question here, asking if there's a place where a GA aircraft can park without paying an arm and a leg, and is there still a wash rack at the airport?
Yes, small airplanes can park at Reed Hillview without paying an arm and a leg. That was a little plug for you, Eric. You're welcome. There is not a spot for transient aircraft at San Jose other than the Jet Center and Signature. So if you're a based aircraft, obviously you can rent an open tie down, with the city at a much more reasonable price than Signature or Atlantic. But if you're a transient just coming in for the day or a few hours, you have to go to the 2 FBOs, and their ramp fees, even if you buy fuel, are more than you're going to want to pay to buy that hamburger or whatever that you're coming to San Jose to experience. So we thought putting in the second FBO would everybody thought when we just had Atlantic that there was a monopoly on the system and they could charge whatever they want, and as soon as we got a second one, it would solve. And I was always pessimistic that wouldn't happen. And when the second one came in, it didn't, fuel prices dropped about, 20, 30 cents a gallon, but the rest of it stayed the same. And I think fuel has gone back up. So it's a moot point now, but they are both very focused on jet powered aircraft. That's where they make their money. The people that buy several hundred gallons of jet fuel versus can you top off both sides of my 172, and they sell a total of 12 gallons of avgas. So it's sad. It's not what any of us want, but it's where the money is, right? And they're in business to make money. So small GA, sadly enough, has a tough time being a transient at San Jose.
Yeah. So you talked about going out for that vacant parcel of property. Is there any idea of what you would do with that?
Well, our first hope, obviously, is that it's aviation related. And so it's a little bit too small for a third FBO, and I don't know that we could justify a third FBO. That's splitting a finite amount of jet fuel between 3 people instead of just 2 people. And so I'm not sure that's the right mix. We're actually thinking more of either a corporate facility or kind of a condo complex for small corporate facilities, like what AvBase kind of is, right? AvBase, if you don't know, is a hangar facility that you can rent a portion of for your small corporate operation where you have 1 plane, 2 pilots, you need a little office and a place to meet your executives, right, when they come to fly. And so I could see something like that happening. A jet suite, if they ever get back up in the air, could do a terminal over there. So I think it's still, my intention is a general aviation facility, but not an FBO, something that's more corporate or hangar, multi-hangar kind of complex, those kind of things. It's about 14 acres in a very weird shape. Because remember that little religious memorial is there at the corner of Martin and De La Cruz, right? Kind of takes a weird corner out of that parcel. So it's got a whole bunch of weird angles that don't work well with square hangars or rectangular hangars. So
that makes sense. So one of the questions that I see here is from Roy, and it's asking if the curfew is the only factor limiting growth of freight traffic.
Probably not. There's probably a little bit of concern that our ramp is very crowded. UPS spills over in the taxiway. FedEx has a pretty dedicated ramp for themselves. When we get into the Christmas season and UPS brings in a double or a triple operation, it overflows onto the taxiway quite a bit. 2 planes on the taxiway, 1 in the parking position. So I think we are physically restricted for a productive, even though you can park on a taxiway, it's not a productive way to load a plane and unload a plane. So I think we are a little bit land restricted. I mean, at 1,000 acres, there's not a lot of room to have spare ramp area that can handle a 757 or a 767. So I think it's a combination, but I know the curfew does impose a lot of pressure on cargo in general because they love to fly at night and land early in the morning, right? So you can get it into the next mode of transportation and move on. But there are other restrictions for us.
Yeah, imagine with the dramatic decrease in traffic, flying packages into Oakland isn't the challenge the last few months that it has been in the past.
Right, and they have the facility there already, so it's easy for them to say, let's just add another 767 into Oakland and, bring another whole batch of packages over there. It's fairly simple for them. So we were really focusing on our belly freight with the British Airways flight and the Hainan flight. This new belly freight facility, we've been working with CBP to make sure they staff it so that we can take the international cargo right here. Because currently our international cargo gets inspected at San Francisco, sealed, and driven down and then stuck into the belly of British Airways or ANA or Hainan, and then the reverse when it lands. So we've been really focused on trying to fix that, right? So it becomes a strictly in and out facility that's much more efficient for moving that international cargo. So
Absolutely. What has happened with your international flights? Are you seeing any of those coming back?
All of them are in contact with us and want to come back. There is challenges, obviously, with international travel right now still being heavily restricted and points of entry being heavily restricted. I think the first one back may very well be ANA, the first one that we've had in the last umpteen years. They stay in very regular contact with us. The difference between Japan and the rest of Asia is very separate. They're viewed as two very different things in the U.S. So opening that border situation, I would imagine would happen first, followed probably by England and then the China thing, because the China situation is not just COVID-19.
Right.
There are so many other political, trade, that, you know, anytime that you can take something and use it as a stick with with one of your people you're negotiating with, even if it's not an aviation issue, you use this bilateral agreement, right, as a pushing stick to say, well, then you have to buy more farm goods, or you have to buy more computer chips, or you have to import more cars, or whatever it is, right? And so we're getting used as a negotiating chip. And so I think China will probably be a little bit behind that, just because of how the current administration is approaching trade with China. And China's fighting back, you know, and they're just not rolling over. It's very apparent they're fighting back. Because this had actually been going on long before COVID, right? This was something that had been happening for quite a while.
Yeah, this is kind of another tool in their kit box for how to make those negotiations work.
Right, and we just end up on the bad end of that tool. So.
Yes. So what is your personnel budget each year?
Just enough. I have no idea, Eric.
You don't know?
We have 220-ish full-time employees at the airport. And then we have significant amount of contract employees. We contract out curb management, custodial, parking, busing, and we contract out PD and fire, obviously, to the city. But the rest of the staff is about 220-ish. And I'm sorry, but I those numbers escape me.
That's all right. Are you, have you all put a freeze on hiring with all this craziness?
No, the city has, and so we have to respect that, and we've been able to work with them to get exceptions to the freeze. I am convinced we never really recovered all of our staff from the Great Recession. And so I think we are a very slim staffed medium hub airport. And I honestly feel that we have the right size team and the right team in place to build ourselves out of this issue that we're currently in. So I don't want to reduce staff, and I communicate with the city manager's office when I do have vacancies about the importance. And so far they've been very supportive. So we actually have 2 or 3 positions that are actually in recruitment right now to fill, because they're critical to us.
Yeah. So I met you, John, when I was an intern out there, and that was about 25 years ago.
Yes, it was.
It's hard to believe. One of the questions that I see here is, have you continued on with that internship program, or is that even a possibility this year with COVID?
I'm not sure it's a possibility, because we're just so distracted, and we're not even working at the airport. I mean, for the most part, I have operations and facilities at the airport full time. The rest of us that are office or administrative staff, I go in about 3 days a week, and I work at home about 2 days a week-ish, something like that, 3 to 4 days a week. But most of our like finance staff, planning and development, those engineering, they're working from home. And so it'd be tough to have an intern come to work and learn something when nobody's there to teach you. You wouldn't go to the person's house to learn finance or whatever. Now,
Right.
ops and facilities probably could swing one, but our HR staff would have to, process that and all. And it's just not a priority for the city. And again, we work through the city for those kind of things also. And Eric, I was actually an intern about 5 years before you were. So it's been a long tradition of internships, and it's built a great relationship with San Jose State for us, and a great pipeline for young talent to come into the organization. And so I just don't, this summer has been so messed up with the kids didn't even get to finish school. So when do you really start a internship program if you never actually left campus and said, "Whew, I'm done with my spring semester"? If you got sent home in April. I am definitely going to bring it back next summer. I think we just have to take a hiatus for this one summer because of mass confusion and lack of people at the facility. So.
Oh, that makes a lot of sense. One other question I have here is, how do you decide which vendors, let's see if I'm reading that right, which vendors get to operate in the terminal? Is there a seniority list?
Yeah. Well, no, it's mostly the concessions choice. We have 2 big concessionaires, one on the food side and one on the retail side, and they decide. I tell them how much I want open, and then they decide what to leave open. And so Host is our food and beverage, so they decided the 2 Starbucks, because people seem to not be able to live without Starbucks. And although I don't drink coffee, so I'm fine without it. But and then Chick-fil-A is effective and has the lowest cost per operation, right? It's a very fast in and out, high production, low cost thing, versus something like a San Jose Joe's, where you have to have, a bunch more people to operate a full restaurant like that. So they make the choices, recommend it to me, and then I approve them, or actually they recommend it to my staff, and then they bring it up to me to approve it. And I'm trying to balance the needs of the passenger and the needs of the vendor. When we started through this and we started contemplating, do we relieve all these mags and everything, which we are relieving the mags. We've been relieving them since April. My staff was trying to get me to not relieve the mags, so were other airports, but I think we all realized after a couple months of this, I can make you pay the mag until you're bankrupt, but then there'll be nobody to sell food at the airport. Or I can try and partner with you, take some of my CARES money, make me whole, and relieve you from the mag. And then at least when the good times come, I'll have someone to sell hamburgers and Italian dinners and everything else upstairs. So it really comes down to partnership and relationship. About, you can be as stubborn as you want, but in this situation, I think stubbornness means you lose in the long run. I'm going to end up with a whole bunch of bankrupt companies, and I'm going to have to go upstairs and flip hamburgers at the Smash Burger, and that's just not going to work out really well. So, it's that kind of approach of kind of a really talking, understanding their situation, and partnering with them to say, I need something. Give me something open that, can serve food not only to the passengers, but between my staff and the airline staff, there's still hundreds of employees a day on 3 shifts there that a lot of times eat at our concessions. They don't always bring a ham sandwich from home. They go upstairs and they eat in our concessions. And so it's very necessary for us to have a certain amount of stuff open. We do hope to open Tres Gringos in Terminal A in the next few weeks. And then we hope to open Smashburger in B in the next few weeks, in addition to the Chick-fil-A that's already open. So we're starting to get to the passenger volume where we need a few more grab and go kind of restaurants open.
Yeah. Well, that's good news. That
Yes.
kind of goes with your talk about the graph and how it's beginning to climb. Double, would you say double the passengers last month?
April to May doubled, and then May to June looks like it's going to double again. So, yeah, very good.
Yeah, keep that up for a couple of years, and you'll be back where you were.
Yeah.
So there's one other question here that says, does the airport have a break-even number for passengers with the current MAG contracts?
So a passenger number that said we would go back to the full MAGs and make them pay the MAGs. Is that okay? So, well, the MAGs were bid when we were around the 10 million passenger mark, with a prediction to grow at 4% from there. So I think to have everything open and have MAGs, we're going to have to be somewhere between like 6 and 10 million passengers to get to that point where I'm maybe relieving part of the MAG or something else. Now, while they're not paying the MAG, don't think I don't get anything from it. When they're not paying the MAG, they owe me a percentage of gross. It's in the contract that you pay percentage of gross, but if you don't make enough that way, you have to pay me the MAG. So I've waived the MAG. They still have to pay me the percentage of gross. So for every dollar you spend on a hamburger, I'll get 10 or 12 cents, depending on where you buy it. I'll get a certain percentage of that. So I still get that percentage of gross. So I'm still getting some level of income from them. It's not totally freewheeling where they get, all of the money. So it's just I have to go from a MAG to this per hamburger kind of revenue stream. So it's dramatically different.
That's a real challenge. Sure, I'm not muted here. We're getting close to the time that we had allotted. You had mentioned that there were a couple of cool things that have happened in the time that you were there, and I wondered if you might give us a couple of parting comments on cool things that have happened.
Well, I think, like you and I had talked, I had started a different PowerPoint when Richard first talked to me. And I went back and I pulled up the aerials from, like 93 when I started, and 30 right was only 4,000 feet long, and the left was still only like 8,800 feet long. Mm-hmm. And there was T shelters down below the two runways and the old general aviation terminal and the hangars on both sides. And, progressing through when I first started in 93, Atlantic Aviation and the 15 acres to the north of it was a farm. They were growing castor beans over there, and there was tractors and plows and all sorts of stuff over there. The old barns that they would store the tractors in, where the control tower is now, there used to be what we called the enchanted forest. It was about 3 trees close together, and we used to barbecue over there, basically where the control tower is now, because the control tower, remember, was right outside Terminal C,
mm-hmm.
The old Terminal C. There used to be the control tower on that side. So I was just going to go through some of the unique things that probably some of the younger people on the phone call that are getting into aviation wouldn't remember. Some of our older tenants that have been around with San Jose for a long time, it would have been just kind of a walk down memory lane of what the airport used to be like years ago. So a lot of growth, a lot of unique things. I mean, I remember signing the extension of 30 left when it went to 11,000 feet. We brought Norm Mineta and the city council and all the employees out onto the runway with Sharpies, and we signed the concrete of the runway before the 777 took off for Tokyo on the runway. So a lot of unique things we did to celebrate you know, through the years. And, you know, it was just I was going to go through those kind of just fun things. And it's unusual for someone to have that level of experience at an airport, or not that level of experience, but that much experience, because most of us, you know, in this industry change jobs every 6 years, right? You want to get promoted, you have to move and go somewhere else. And so it's unusual to spend 27 plus years in the same airport watching it go from something average to what it is today. And there's still more change coming. I mean, we've got changes to the taxiway structure on the west side. We've got Terminal C coming back. Who knew after we demoed it that would actually come back, and hopefully it'll be nicer this time and have jetways. But you know, it's kind of fun to watch that. You know, as I grew up, right, the airport grew up at the same time, and to be able to look back at all of that. And I was able to find a handful of pictures, not as many as I wanted, because it's you know, it's the funniest thing. I even do this at home. You take pictures and you put them away. You go, oh, I don't need to write a date on that. I'll remember when that was. And then 25, 30 years later, you look at it, go, when the hell was that picture taken? You know, and so I would look through all this stuff, and I'm like, you'd try to identify, is the jet center there? Is, you know, is the runway still short? You try to figure out what the time frame of that picture was, because nobody dates anything. They just all think they'll remember, and you really don't over time. It's funny, but yeah, it was actually. I actually enjoyed about 2 afternoons finding pictures and trying to build this original PowerPoint that I was going to go with. But I think this one worked out well. It really gave you guys an exposure to COVID, the dramatic changes to the airport, and a little bit about the safety and the care we're putting into the facility to keep you safe while you travel with us. You know, that the extra work we're doing. And we're not alone. All 429 something commercial service airports are wiping down all the chairs and, you know, cleaning the restrooms 5 times an hour and all that kind of stuff. But it's about communicating it and telling people they're going to be safe during this transition from car to airplane, that you're going to be safe and healthy. So, anyways, that was my couple things I kind of shared with you before we got started on the call.
Well, John, thank you very much for taking the time and to put this together and come and entertain us, share some of your knowledge. We've got 23 people on right now, and I think I speak for all of them when I say that I really enjoyed it. And again, I really appreciate your time.
Great. Thank you very much. Thanks for having me. Have a great night.
Hey, John, it's Scott. Thanks.
Thanks, Scott.
Awesome job.
See ya.
I can see you.
Yeah.